Start because it's 11, and if anybody wants to come in, come on in. This is our last IDT Roundtable for this semester. We'll have a whole new brand new series next semester. Stacy Smith is from the Disabilities Services, and her role is accommodation specialist, and she's here to talk about accessibility designs for online courses and in general. And we're really glad that she's here because she's not feeling very well this morning. So thank you for not bailing out on us. And without further ado, I'll let her start, and then we'll have questions and answers at the end of the session.
All right, today we're going to talk about accessible design and meeting the needs of students with disabilities. This is me. I am the Adaptive Technology Specialist at Disability Support Services at K-State. My email is stacylee@ksu.edu. If you didn't get my information, there should be cards stapled to the handout in the back of the room. The handout gives you all the resources that I originally had in the slides and decided they would be more effective on a handout that you could take with you instead of a whole stack of PowerPoint slides that you might throw away or recycle or whatever. So please do pick up one of those. All right, our goals today in this presentation are to provide a background on accessibility for students with disabilities, discuss how students access e-learning content and how you can experience this on your own computer, and then to show some simple strategies for creating accessible course content. First of all, what is meant by accessibility? Well, if you're like me and you have a question about what something means, the first place you go is Google. So this is what I did. And the definition that I found that I liked the most was this one. Accessibility is a term used to describe the relative ease or difficulty in reaching a waterfall. Unfortunately, this doesn't have a lot to do with us. So for our purposes, accessibility refers to the possibility for everyone, regardless of physical or technological readiness, such as people with disabilities, to access and use technology and information products. To do that, we apply principles of universal design. Universal design is the design of products and environments to be usable by all people to the greatest extent possible, without the need for adaptation or specialized design. Now, this may seem like something that should be pretty obvious, that from the outset we design things so that everybody can use them. But it doesn't turn out to be that way most times. There are 7 principles of universal design. In the interest of time today, I'm not going to cover all of those because there are some other things I like to focus on. However, I did want to give a couple of examples. One principle of universal design is called equitable use. This means that the design is useful and marketable to people with diverse abilities. As you can see here, we have 2 people coming out of the grocery store doors. One person is pushing a shopping cart, the other person is in a wheelchair. How many of you use the automatic doors on a regular basis, especially coming out of the grocery store, Target, or somewhere? You ever, this seems to happen to me a lot at Target. You go step on the pressure pad that opens the door and nothing happens. How many of you will go to another door because it wouldn't open for you instead of pushing it open yourself? Anybody do that? I do that. We've become so used to that. And if you have a baby, you've got a kid on one hip and a sack of groceries in the other, you really appreciate that automatic door. I've seen people going into the union where you have to push a button to open the door that have their arms full of boxes and things for presentations, and they can get one finger over to push that button to get that door open. So it's not just for people with disabilities, it benefits others as well. Another one is perceptible information. The design communicates necessary information effectively to the user, regardless of ambient conditions or the user's sensory abilities. So even if you can't see the screen or the lighting isn't very good, you can still figure out what to do. An example from the internet is this skip navigation here on this search bar. If you're using a screen reader, this skip navigation link is read by the screen reader and allows you to skip all the crud that's in that top of the bar and lets you get to the main content on the page. It's also visible here, so someone who can see it can go click on that and skip and go down as well. You may be able to see the screen, but you may still be navigating using your keyboard. And so that allows you to do that. When you apply the principles of universal design, I'm using a lot of terms here: universal access, accessible design, accessibility, all this stuff. So I wanted to try to simplify this a little bit. When you apply the principles of universal design to course development, you get universal access. Universal access is the same as accessible design. So that's where I'm trying to go with this. So let's talk about what accessible design is. With respect to e-learning, how I'm using accessible design is referring to the planning, development, and implementation of courses to be inherently accessible to students with a wide range of abilities, including students with disabilities. Okay, why do we consider accessibility? A very small percentage of our students are students with disabilities. So why do we worry about this? Why spend time and energy on it? Well, the simple answer is because federal law says we have to. It mandates equal access to education, employment, communication, technology, and other resources for persons with disabilities. Just briefly, the disability law that's applicable is the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990 that basically says you can't discriminate against someone on the basis of disability. The second is Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act Amendments of 1973, which says that if you take federal funds, you must provide equal access to students with disabilities. This is where we get curb cuts, where we have ramps going into buildings, where we have elevators that are accessible to students, where we come up with the justification for moving entire courses if the course is being held in an inaccessible location. And then finally, Section 508 of the Rehabilitation Acts of 1998, which requires that electronic and information technology be accessible to persons with disabilities. This is where we get that web pages have to be accessible, that electronic course content has to be accessible. The conclusions of all these laws, the conclusions that we can draw from it, are that universities must provide equal access to educational opportunities for otherwise qualified students. What's otherwise qualified? That's a student that meets the academic and technical standards requisite to admission or participation. So for an on-campus student, that means they've met the admission requirements. They have the appropriate GPA, they have the appropriate test scores, they are mentally capable of taking the courses at K-State. If you're talking about a Division of Continuing Ed course, where the only criteria is having the right kind of computer and a fast enough modem, then you have a whole other situation there. But regardless, if they meet those criteria, they are otherwise qualified. When should courses be accessible? What we do now is when a student enrolls in the course, we scramble around and we try to find a way to accommodate that student. Unfortunately, the Department of Education says this isn't good enough, that courses should be accessible, accessibility should be considered at the beginning of course development. That scrambling around and putting into place ad hoc measures after they've enrolled is not enough, and that the course-taking experience should be similar to the course-taking experience of students without disabilities. In other words, creating a special course for a special student who has special needs is not cool. You should try as much as possible to accommodate that student within the regular classroom. Okay. Even if that classroom is electronic. Bottom line, as far as legal issues go, well, the bottom line, regardless of legal issues, is that accessibility is the right thing to do. However, money is pretty much what makes the world go round. If your entity accepts federal funds, you must meet federal regulations, which means our courses must be accessible. You say, okay, we don't take federal funds. Well, do you take state funds? Because all states take federal funding. And so it trickles down, federal to state, state to local. It has to be accessible. However, we do this, we get bonus points. Accessibility translates into usability. Typically, when we think accessibility, we think people with disabilities. We think usability, we think everybody. A product is usable. Usability benefits everybody. A couple of specific examples. It benefits people for whom English is their second language. We have 150 people enrolled in the English as a Second Language program here at K-State. Those are just the people whose English is poor enough that they felt it necessary to enroll in a program. How many other students do we have here at K-State for whom English is a second language, for whom they have another language spoken at home, and hearing the language perhaps with a reader is beneficial? Usability also taps a variety of learning styles. We all know that people learn in different ways. Some learn by hearing, some learn by writing, some learn by reading. Also, usability benefits instructors. You have flexible courses and happier students. When you have happier students, you have happier T-Vals. You have happier T-Vals, you have happier department heads, deans, etc. This is not a bad thing. Also, your content can be more easily repurposed. If your content is usable, it's much easier to take it, for example, from an on-campus course and translate that to an online course, or to take a transcript and turn that into closed captioning. Okay? And then finally, usability is marketable. If your courses are more usable, they're better courses, K-State can market that as a benefit to students. We have a better reputation. Also, the content is deliverable using emergent technology. So a course that is accessible to a student with a disability is also usable by a PDA where you don't have images maybe, or you need your structure to look a little bit different. And we are headed in that direction. Students are getting the capability of taking their classes on PDAs or on little tiny, the Sony Vaio is what, about this big? Little small screen on their cell phones. And so if we are able to say that we can accommodate that, then so much the better for us. So to sum that up, accessible design benefits our students, it benefits our instructors, and it also benefits our institutions. Okay, so what has to be accessible? Well, the course management software or your course learning system or your learning management software has to be accessible. Any web pages that support the course must be accessible. Anything from your department web pages to the web pages that students use to enroll in the course, to something that an instructor might link to from within their course or something they might create themselves. If this is required content, it has to be accessible. You can't say to a student, oh, I'm sorry, you can't do that assignment, you're going to get a lower grade because those web pages aren't accessible to you. You can't do that. And remember, the course taking experience should be as similar as possible to other students. So you want to use an alternate assignment as a last resort. And then all of your course content that you upload, your presentations, your documents, your graphics, images, video, all that stuff needs to be accessible. Excuse me. So we have to provide accessible e-learning. How the heck do we do that? Well, that's what I was hired to do, was to help you all figure out how to do that. The good news is that K-State Online is already pretty accessible. The navigation works out pretty well. Email is pretty much universally accessible. If a student needs a reader, typically they already have a reader on their computer that works with email. Webmail is maybe a little iffy, but students have choices about what email platforms they use. K-State Online supports a variety of file types, so you can make good choices about what you upload. It does not mean that every feature is accessible. If you're using audio chat and you have a deaf student enroll in your class, obviously you're going to need to do something differently. But a large portion of what's on K-State Online is accessible. The other bonus is that the Axio team is very interested in accessibility. They want to hear your questions. They want to have your feedback. At the recent Axio conference, the way Rob Caffey put it was they request input from the users, They program that, and then they go back and repeat that. Request input program, request input program. So things that I've sent over and said, hey, it would be really nice if you did such and such, has been added to their list of things to do, which is very awesome. I just got back from a conference with universities that are using Blackboard and WebCT, and their accessibility experts have been banging their heads against the wall trying to get Blackboard and WebCT to alter their LMSs for accessibility. So we're very lucky here. Also, there are a variety of tools that already assist with accessibility. I'm going to show you one later. The best part of this is that most of you here aren't responsible for Axio. So you're kind of off the hook in that regard. Instructors, pardon?
No, I said but.
But instructors are responsible for web pages, anything you may link to, anything you may create yourself. And also, all of this great, wonderful, awesome, new multimedia course content that you can put out there. You're responsible for making sure that's accessible in some way. Bad news, you might be wondering, so does this mean I can't use all these cool tools? Does this mean my course has to be really boring? Does it mean it's going to take me a lot of time and effort? And does it mean the university is going to have to spend big bucks to make this happen? You may or may not know closed captioning is pretty darned expensive. You watch shows that say closed captioning provided to you by some sponsor or another. Well, that's because it's pretty darned expensive. Okay? Fortunately, none of this stuff has to be true. You can certainly create a really boring, accessible web page, but you don't have to. You can certainly spend a heck of a lot of money, but my primary goal is to look for ways that we can make things accessible without spending a heck of a lot of money. Eventually, we're going to have to invest, but there are a lot of things that we can do now that don't cost us a lot. The bottom line is that you can use what you want, but you have to plan for accessibility. Considering accessibility hinges on preparation. What have you done as an instructor to prepare for the eventuality that a student with a disability will enroll in your course? Eventually, it will happen. Our disabled population is growing. More and more are coming to college. We have an aging population. There will be people with disabilities enrolling in courses. So how do we plan for accessibility? First, remember that courses must take accessibility into account from the beginning, applying principles of universal design, thinking about what you're doing before you go out there and do it. Sort of like taking a road trip. Sometimes it's fun to get in your car and just drive, but if you have to be at a wedding on Thursday and it's halfway across the country, chances are really good that you've planned out your route, you know what the weather's going to be like, you know where you might stay in a hotel. It's the same thing with planning your courses. Having an idea where you're going, what your end goal is, and how you're going to get there. Learn how students with disabilities access the content. How can you plan for accessibility if you have no idea how students are using it? And then learn the standards or learn where to find good advice, which again is what I'm here for. So, how do students use e-learning? Well, one of the more common ones, especially for persons who are blind, is text-to-speech screen readers. This is good for people with visual, cognitive, and learning impairments. We also have screen enlargement. Zoom text is one. Also, operating systems, Windows and Mac, both have options where you can go in and have it zoom in on things. Also, speech-to-text or voice recognition, which is good for people with mobility impairments, cognitive impairments, and learning impairments. And also sign language interpreters. And I don't have a clip of this. I was going to, but I didn't use it. We are currently working on filming one of our sign language interpreters along with a presentation so that a deaf student that's enrolled in one of the online courses can then access that content using the Tegrity system. So that's another use for Tegrity that maybe you might not think of. All right, and transcripts are valuable to everybody. And I wanted to show you a little bit I promised in my description, I said that I would show some things. So, this one, I talked about K-State Online already being pretty accessible. If you use Mozilla Firefox, which I highly recommend, Mozilla Firefox has an extension that you can download, and all of this is on the handout, the links to all of these things. There's a developer's toolbar that you can download. If you are responsible for creating web content or evaluating web content, this developer's toolbar installs, you see where the X is, where it says disable cookies, CSS, and so on. All of these are pull-down menus that allow you to do nifty things like turn off all of your styles and see how it looks. And you can see it's not really pretty, but it's still accessible. You can still get where you need to go. You can turn off all of your images and see how your page looks. Again, not as pretty, but you can still navigate this. And you can do this on your browser anyway. But what you can also do here is display alt attributes, and it looks like we don't have any alt attributes. However, in this case, we don't necessarily need the alt text. Alt text, if you're looking at a web page, have you ever let your mouse hover over a picture and then a box pops up and there's text there? That's alternate text. And you need to have that there because when the screen reader reads that web page, that text is what it reads. Now, if you have background images like we have here, when I turn off the images, you notice the Willy Wildcat things go away. A blind user doesn't need to know that there were Willy the Wildcat heads there that looked pretty because it doesn't make a bit of difference to them. So not having alt text there, actually you want to have a blank field there. What you want is quotation marks, space, and then quotation marks because then the screen reader will skip that. Otherwise it says image, but then that's all it says. It's just image. And the blind reader is left saying, well, what's in that picture that I'm not seeing? Is it important? Is it not important? You can also, let's see, under tools, you have a bunch of different validators. You can validate your CSS, the feed, the HTML, the links. You can validate it to a Section 508 compliance, which is, oops, I really didn't mean to do that, but we're going to see what happens. Section 508 is that 508 stuff I was talking about, the Rehabilitation Act. The W3C Consortium has come up with a list of an HTML code and a list of issues that you should follow to make sure that your HTML is accessible. And that's what that's referring to. Really did not intend to do that. Just minimize this. All right. As far as Axio being accessible, all right. This is what happens when you have too many things that you want to do. Firefox also allows you to create profiles. And so I'm not sure how many profiles you can have, but you can have different extensions and themes with different profiles. I have the developer toolbar, and I also have a screen reader toolbar that you can pull into this. But they don't like each other very much. So I have two different profiles so I can use both of those. I wanted to show you, Firefox is free.
Untitled HTML.
Can you hear that? What it does is it reads the page to the person. So it's going to read where you are. It's going to tell you how many links there are and so on. It's very much, if you're familiar with JAWS, it's a little bit like JAWS, only it's free instead of $1,000. Free is good. All right. Whoops. It also voices when I type.
www.edu.
All right.
HTML title. Kansas State University.
All right. Sorry. Too many pieces going back and forth. One of the best things you can do to figure out how students use e-learning is to put yourself in their shoes. Disable the images, yes?
When you say Firefox, which version, have you upgraded to the brand new one?
I have not upgraded to 2.0 yet, and you want to be careful because some of the extensions don't work with 2.0. Although there are some extensions that work with 2.0 and not 1.5. So that's a good question. Thank you. So go into your browser, whether you're using Firefox with the toolbar, you can do this in IE, you can do it in Netscape, Safari. All of these browsers will allow you to disable the images. Look at your web page. See if you can figure out what's going on. See if you can navigate it. Does it convey the same information? Can you navigate effectively? Try navigating using the keyboard. Unplug your mouse. See if you can tab around the page, use the Enter key, and so on, and get through. Can you access everything that you're looking for? What about your common file types and components? Use the text-to-speech like I showed you in the Firefox, or Adobe already has a reader built into it that you can listen to. So does Microsoft Office. Listen to them using text-to-speech. Do they make sense? Is the structure there so that you can understand it? Try some silly things. Tape some of your fingers together and then try to use the keyboard. Or, tie your arm down and see if you can still get around the screen well enough. Little things sometimes, like when you hover, you use your mouse and you hover over a link and it pulls up another box. Any of you ever have trouble when you try to go over to that box, it disappears? Imagine if you were impaired, you had mobility impairment and you were trying to do that. How much more time it would take you to try to get through that structure. Have you done a lecture where maybe you're describing objects, you're describing graphs? Close your eyes and listen to it and see if the student would still be getting that content. Now I want to go back to the reader. And you can have this, select the text. You can do all kinds of fun things with this.
Harold
But
Prince selected as case professor of the year for Kansas.
I probably can't hear this very well.
College of Veterinary Medicine announces professorships. K-State experts suggest gifts.
Okay, it's not the best voice in the world, but it will give you an idea of what a blind student is doing when they're coming to your web page. How are they using that? A very important element of that is the links.
List of elements.
This bar is actually pulling up the different elements. You have headings, links, images, form elements, access key, and frames. So you can go through and you can look at all of the headings. And you can go through the different headings and go exactly where you want to go. You can look at the links. Now this is an important thing, these links. What do you see here about these links? Do they all make sense? No. Where do you see problems?
One says more.
One says, actually, more than one says more.
Yeah.
Or what?
More what? If you don't have the context in these links, and JAWS does this as well, you can pull up a list of links and you can navigate by the links. If you don't have the context, you have no clue where you're going. Some of these too, skip to content is important because that's the skip link that's going to take you to the main content. Some of these, like 2006 Kansas State University, I don't know what you do with that. There are several of these that are kind of strange, but I want to go down to this one.
More. External link. More. HTML title. K-State Media Relations homepage. List of
This
elements.
one, I don't know how this happened exactly. I haven't looked at the source code, but it sure looks like we have a heading here, doesn't it? Well, according to this,
There are no such elements.
there are no headings on this page. So if you're using a screen reader that's looking for headings to figure out where it's at, on this page, the screen reader has no clue. Okay? So obviously I'm a big fan of Firefox because of the free cool stuff you can do with it. All right, how do screen readers work? Again, they're beneficial to a range of students, not just for students with visual impairments, but also people with cognitive processing disorders. Maybe you have a print disorder, and so looking at the text while you hear the text helps you learn better than if you're just trying to read it. Also, mobility impairments. Maybe you are a high-level quad and you don't have use of your arms. You can see just fine, but you can't use that mouse. Being able to navigate using the keyboard or maybe voice commands and having that read to you could be very beneficial. The technology relies on a coded document structure. For those of you that are familiar with HTML, this should all be very familiar to you. Using headings, knowing what is a heading, what is body text, what order things were created in. There can be problems when you use frames for structure, if you use tables improperly. Tables should only be used for content that belongs in tables. It should never be used to build pages on, to make sure that your picture goes in this corner and your text goes in this corner. The screen reader, they're getting better, but they don't know what to do with that in most cases. They also rely on cues such as periods and commas to tell them how to pace, to pause longer here, to pause shorter here. This can cause problems when you're making online tests. If you're not using punctuation, for example, if you have a multiple choice question and you have not used periods at the ends of your multiple choice questions, I shouldn't have closed the browser yet. I have an example of this. It'll read A, it'll read the question, then it reads A and the answer, and because there's no period, it immediately jumps to the next line and reads B. And so it becomes very difficult for the student to understand where the answer begins and ends and to separate out all that information. All right. There's a lot of free adaptive technology that you can try out on your own. Adobe Reader, Microsoft Office, they both have readers built into them. Again, not great, but they are there. There's a language bar in Office that I'm going to show you in just a minute that will allow you to do speech to text, voice recognition. Mozilla Firefox, which I just showed you, has the developer toolbar, the Firefox extension, and there are other really cool things too. I believe there's an extension that allows you to check your contrast to make sure that your contrast is readable. There's Read Please, which is a free download. Well, there's a trial version and then there's a version you pay for. And the free version works very well. We use it extensively in our office. You just copy and paste text into it and then it reads to you, and I'll show you that in a minute as well. And then there are some web validation tools, also free, that will allow you to check your HTML and make sure that they're compliant. So let's look at Read Please. This is very simple. These are just the instructions that come with it. It allows you to control your speed, the font size. So if you have a visual impairment and you want to see this bigger as it's being read to you, this is an easy way to do it. And there are several voices. She looks kind of like she works on the street.
Ouch. I told you before, that really hurts.
They don't like it when you click on the face.
I have already asked you 4 times to stop clicking on my
Hush.
face. How would you like it if someone kept clicking on your face? It is bad enough that we are all trapped inside your computer. I will not ask you again. Thank you very much.
All right, but you can change the voices, and you can change quite a bit about it. And it's why won't it play now? I don't know why it won't play. Technical difficulty. At any rate, it will read to you, and you can change various things about it. If you do buy the full version, it's about $40, so it's really not that expensive as far as software goes. You can get more voices for it. You have more options. It's bigger screen. You can do all kinds of cool stuff with it. They also have a reading bar that will install at the top of whatever software you have open that will read what's in the software as well. I also wanted to show you, that's not it. Microsoft has built-in voice recognition, which can be helpful. It's fun to play with. That's what's important, right? It's fun to play with. You go into tools and then speech. The first time you do this, it does have to be trained. It's not very good unless you've trained it. Let me move. But you get this bar that comes up. You need headphones that have a microphone on them. Let's see if it's recognizing me. It may not. Hello? Dictation. This is what voice recognition looks like, period. The more you train it, the better it gets, period. It can be a very helpful tool, for example, if you want to do transcripts along with a presentation that you're doing, comma, you could speak. You do have to put in commas and periods and so on, but you could speak what you want to have and have it pulled up. Period. Whoops. See, the more you train it, the better it gets. I've trained it some. It's not perfect. It's free. It came with your operating system, period. Select, voice command. Voice command. Select all. Oh, didn't want to do that. Select paragraph. Delete. All right. It also, if you're not using it, you want to close it because
You have a good reason for needing your own private office now.
it doesn't want to close. If you leave it on, and especially if you leave the microphone plugged in, it can do some really strange things to your programs. So if you're not using it, you want to unplug it, turn it off, and etc. All right. I keep going back too far. And all the web validation tools, all the links to this stuff is on that handout. So let's talk about some practical application for this stuff. And I chose these pictures on purpose because we are entering an age where we are learning differently. We're learning using different tools. So your student may be online laying on her computer using her laptop. You may have a student that's using a PDA to access course content, to do email, whatever. Actually, we have 2 people using PDAs. We may have someone using voice recognition. You may not even know. We get the technology good enough and get the courses planned well enough, you may not even know if a student has a disability and is in your course because they can access that. The number 1 accommodation is extended time on exams. Fortunately, K-State Online allows you to grant timed exemptions. We're going to get out of here once again. That voice command bar is still up. All right, when you're in K-State Online, you're in the assessment suite. You pull up your list of assignments. You want to choose the assignment, go to Scores, and then there's this Timed Exceptions tab up here. Extend will allow you to extend the date as well. So if you have a student who suddenly has to go to a funeral and the test is due on a certain date, you can go into the Extend tab and give them an extra week to take the test. But if you just want to give them extra time at the same time everyone else is doing it, you click on the timed exception, you choose your student, and grant timed exception. And it asks you to make absolutely darn tootin' sure that you want to give extra time to this student. And it's going to sit here and think about it for a little bit. It's going to eventually open up a page that will have a little box where you can type in the extra time that you want the student to have. Nice. You need to be careful because this box asks you for the extra time that you want them to have, not the total time that they will have when it's all said and done, but the extra time that they will have. So if it's a 60-minute exam and they get time and a half as their accommodation, don't type in 90 minutes because then they're going to have over 2 hours to finish their test. You want to type in 30 minutes. And once it comes up, after you typed in that figure and clicked OK, then you're going to get another screen that will list all of your students, and it will also show you how much time each student has. So you can go in and you can check on that and make sure that you've given that exception. I think we're just going to ignore this and go back to the presentation. All right, the number one word processing software is most likely Microsoft Word. It's everywhere. And if you're using another program, you can save it as a Microsoft Word compatible file. When you're using Microsoft Word, use the styles to do your formatting. Remember how I said screen readers use code to understand where they are and where they need to go, the document structure? When you use styles to mark up your document, I'm going to show this in a little bit, that gives the reader what it needs to be able to figure out where it's at in your document. You go under Format, Styles, and Formatting, and again, I'm going to show you this in a little bit. It also translates well to HTML. So if you're using Word to create documents that you then save as a web page, when you've used the styles to mark it up, all of those headings and so on that you've done in the styles are going to translate into the HTML code to be headings and body and so on, which will also allow the reader to follow along. When you save it, the best way you can save this to be accessible to the widest range of people is to save this as a web page, but as a filtered web page. I'll also show you that in a minute. You can save as a web page, and then down where the file types are, where you have a drop-down list and you can choose what kind of file type, save it as filtered. When you save as a web page, Microsoft is famous for putting a bunch of junk in HTML documents. If you save it as a filtered web page, you get less junk. HTML is universally accessible. Filtered avoids the extraneous code. If you save it as a regular document, then offer at least two options. You can put it up there as a .doc, but also put it up there as a .txt or .rtf. Most students are going to have Word or something that read Word. Maybe some of them don't. If you offer it in a couple of different formats, then you reach a wider range of people, especially as we start having international students, maybe some disadvantaged international students who are coming in who maybe don't have the software that we take for granted. TXT is universal. TXT strips all of the formatting. It uses the ASCII character set. It's going to work on any computer. However, again, you lose that formatting. So you lose all those great styles and headings and so on that you put in. RTF preserves the formatting. I don't know if it preserves the styles or not. So HTML first, doc, and then TXT or RTF second. Or HTML and doc would be fine. Oh, I was going to show you. All right. This is an assignment that I did, and you can actually do this using the voice recognition thing. You can tell it to access your menus and so on. But I turned that off. I'm not going to turn it back on. If you go into Format and Styles and Formatting, this pulls up your formatting bar. You just select what you want. I'm going to go down and make this a heading 1. So you select that. You automatically get that font and so on. However, whoops, I'm not too crazy about the way this looks. I like to have my headings centered. So when you mouse over this, you get a drop-down menu. You click Modify. Then it pulls up a little editing bar here. I can change the font, the size, whether it's bold, italic, what color it is. I just want to center it. So I tell it that, and there it is. Okay? Personally, I find styles a little bit annoying because it's easier just to go in and put bold and center. However, you gain so much by using the styles that I think if I get used to using the styles, I won't find it annoying anymore. And this, you have all these different things that you can use. You can change what a followed hyperlink looks like. You have all the different sizes that are typically used in HTML, a lot of different options. You can also create custom styles. So maybe you have a certain look that you like your documents to have. You don't like what Microsoft gives you. You want to have your own look and feel. You can do that, and then you can import your own styles. Maybe you have different styles. Maybe you're writing, maybe you're publishing in professional journals, and they use Chicago, and they want a certain thing. You can set up a style to meet their style, and then you could have one that you use for your assignment sheets, etc. So it can be a very flexible tool. Did I show you everything you needed to see on the Word? Yes, no? Okay. We'll go with that. All right. I think this is 2003 is the latest one before 2007. 2007 has some major changes coming along. However, at the conference I was just at, I met a woman who's doing beta testing for PowerPoint 2007, and she is a JAWS user. And so Microsoft is attempting to take accessibility more into account. How well they're going to do with it, I don't know. It's going to be a while, I think, before I can afford PowerPoint 2007, but we'll see. All right, other questions? The number one presentation method is PowerPoint. How long has it been since you've been to a presentation that didn't use PowerPoint? I can't remember one that didn't use PowerPoint, unless it was a presentation where they were supposed to use PowerPoint and the technology didn't work. All right, there are some simple things that you can do with PowerPoint to make it more accessible. You can make good design choices. For example, your slide background. PowerPoint gives you all of these different choices for slide backgrounds. Some of them are really cool, but cool may not be readable. Same thing with your font choice. You have all these font choices, things that look like handwriting, things that look like comic books, billboards, but cool may not be readable. Make sure that you have sufficient contrast so that readers can see your text. You've been to presentations where they use maybe a blue font on a black background and you can't read it, it makes your eyes hurt. By the same token, you can have too much contrast. For people who maybe are vulnerable to migraines, blinding white backgrounds can be too much. Slides are cheap. You can use as many slides as you want up to a certain point. There is no reason to cram as much text onto one slide as you possibly can. Yet everybody does it. In fact, I saw a presentation recently where they used entrance and exit codes on the PowerPoint, on the animation, and they were using one slide with about 5 or 6 different pieces of text that all kind of overlapped when you printed it. It's hard to describe this. So when you actually looked at the slide, you had this mash of stuff all piled on top, but when you watched the presentation, because of the animation schemes, things were coming in and leaving and so on. Well, I can't imagine what that would do to a reader. It would be terrible. Again, slides are cheap. In fact, you might say they're almost free once you bought the program. Use images only when they add to or reinforce meaning. Don't put them there just because they're cool. I'm going to show you, provide alternate text for images, graphics, and etc. Again, for that screen reader. Poor design choices. Funky background. We have things going on the screen just because they're kind of cool. They're really annoying. You have all this text. Would you want to look at a presentation that uses this color scheme? And this is the coded PowerPoint color scheme. I didn't change anything. I just added some animation to the figures. This would not be fun. Other fun things. This was my favorite animation. Can you imagine watching an entire presentation where every line came down like this? There's a reason why I didn't do that with the rest of them. What is your eye drawn to on this? What do you see? The very bottom one, don't you? Because it's the most contrast. You really don't want, and I see this all the time. I see people using rainbow fonts or different fonts on a slide all the time. It's nothing but distracting and annoying. Just please don't do it. You go to what's brightest. You're fighting really with the title and the rainbow thing. So the moral of the story is just because you can doesn't mean you should. Please. So here's the big question. How do we save accessible PowerPoint? How many of you assume that because PowerPoint is used so much, it's relatively accessible? Oh, nobody's going to fall for that because of the way I set it up, right? The best way to save accessible PowerPoint for free is not to use PowerPoint. The best way to do a slide presentation for free that's accessible is to make a web page and use the web page to make your presentation. In order to be able to use a screen reader for PowerPoint, the student has to have the full version of PowerPoint. Now, if they do have the full version of PowerPoint, this is great because they can download that PowerPoint presentation. They can make the text bigger if they want to. They can change the contrast. They can manipulate those slides in some really great ways that can be useful for a wide range of students. Unless you are the sort of instructor who doesn't want your students manipulating your content, and so you've saved it in a way that they can't do that. Then there's not much point in giving them a PowerPoint. There are PowerPoint readers, there are Adobe readers, there are readers for all kinds of things, but JAWS and a lot of other screen readers don't get along well with plugins. And so it may still be not useful to them, even if they have the plugin. When you save as a web page, when you go into PowerPoint, it allows you to save as a web page. Maybe you've gone, and I'll show you in a minute how to put alt text into a PowerPoint, and it's the same kind of process for Word documents, for Excel, and so on. You would think that when you use PowerPoint to put in alternate text, that when you save as a web page, it turns into the alt text tag in your HTML document. But it doesn't. It turns into a value in in an image tag somewhere. So the reader can't find it, which it blows my mind that they chose to do that. If it's alt text, it should be alt text, but it doesn't work out that way. If you save as a filtered web page, it's better, but you still get the same problem with the alt text. Also, the pages that are generated by PowerPoint saving as a web page use frames to navigate. And it's possible to navigate using frames, but it's a pain in the rear. So you're causing your user more problems if you do this. Also, the reading order may be off. I just learned this. I had no idea. The reader will read in the order you created something on the slide. So if you make a slide and you decide that you don't like the order and you rearrange everything, the reader's going to read it in the way it was first put on there. And you can change that, but you have to be aware that it's doing that so that you can change it. PowerPoint is another place where you should use the formatting that's provided. Just like Microsoft, where you should use the styles. When you're using PowerPoint, as much as possible, use the templates. Some readers will ignore text boxes. So if you've used text boxes to put stuff on your pages, they may not even be seen, depending on how you're saving your file. All right. So how do we really make it accessible? How do we make it accessible for the widest range of people? Well, we have to spend some money to do that. The very best piece of software that I came back with from this conference is called LexShare, and I'm going to show that to you in a minute. The guy that created LexShare, it was based on his frustration with the next piece of software I'm going to show you. There are problems with that piece of software, so he made his own piece of software. And that also, the point behind his software is that you have one file that's accessible to everybody. You don't have to have a PowerPoint file and then one that's accessible to somebody who's blind or to somebody with a mobility disorder or disability. You just have that one file. That said, you can export it in about 4 different ways. So you have maybe one QuickTime movie that's accessible to everybody, or you have one HTML document that's accessible to everybody. The next one is the Illinois Accessibility Wizard. LexShare is very new. If you go on Google and you Google PowerPoint and accessibility, every page you get is going to tell you you need the Illinois Accessibility Wizard, because that's all there's been for quite some time. It is a little easier to use because it actually installs an option in your file menu in PowerPoint, whereas LexShare you have to bring up external to PowerPoint. However, you have fewer options, and the output is, imagine web pages, let's say back in the 80s. That's kind of the output you get. This sort of going back 20 years, maybe not 20 years, 10, 15 years, and looking at web pages back then. Also creates multiple documents. So you have a document that's accessible to sighted users, a document that's accessible to blind users, and so on. What's okay is making a PDF, but in order to make a PDF, you had to have Adobe. Again, the readers, the plugins don't work very well with some of the readers. There's other software that you can use, but it has some issues as well. And I didn't want to do all of that, so. All right, I'm going to show you LexShare, but to do that, downside is you have to close pretty much everything in order to run LexShare. And this is a demonstration copy. Hello. Any questions up to this point? If there are two versions, the basic version that does not do audio is $40. The version that does handle audio and will produce QuickTime movies and podcasts is $70 to $80. I think it was $70. So it's very reasonable. All right. So you open the presentation that you want. And it is a new piece of software. It is a little buggy. I've had it freeze on me and stuff, but the output that you get, I think, is worth it. I came home a convert. Can you tell? One of the things I really like about LexShare is it's very, very visual. So you have the current slide that you're on. So when I move across, it changes. So you have a large version. The table shows you the different elements that are on that slide. This bar across the bottom, there are actually two bars here. You can see it here. This bar tells you about your accessibility. This bar tells you about your titles. You can also see that the contrast is very high between these. So people that are colorblind, even if they can't recognize the colors, they should still be able to see the contrast. And from my experience with individuals who are colorblind, often if the colors are very intense, they can tell what color it is. And you can also see for people who are sighted and don't have colorblind issues, red, we know something's wrong with red, right? We know something's not great with yellow. It's not bad, but it's not great either. All right, this slide, you'll notice, this says there's alternate text missing. I have images, I didn't put alternate text in. In this one, I did go into PowerPoint and I did put in alternate text. And so when it pulled it out from PowerPoint, it also pulled the alt text. So that alt text is also in there. When you go into PowerPoint, and you add your alt text, there's no option to put in a long description. So if you have a graph, let's say, and you need to describe what's going on in that graph so the student will understand, you have to try to cram that into the alt text, which is really not the place for it. This, however, will allow you to do that. So you can see that I have several images that have problems. When I go in here and I type in my alt text, that'll go away. I can also choose whether or not I want alt text. So if this is just a bullet or something, I can choose to turn the alt text off. Or I can put in just the this, which will tell the reader to skip it. I can also put in my long description if I want to do that. And I put in lots of images, so I have to do this with every one. And as soon as I get all that alt text in there, it turns to green. So there's no question whatsoever that you've done it, you're finished. The duplicate title, Often when you're giving a presentation, you may be talking about the same subject for 2 or 3 slides, so you leave the same title. Well, what happens when you generate a web page? It's kind of like that more thing over and over again. You get all these links that are the same. With this, you can go in, and it brings you up a list of your titles, and you can go in and change one of them or however many you want to, and it takes care of that problem as well. It does not change the text on your slide. It only changed the link to that slide. So you could call that slide whatever you wanted to and have a link to it, but it's not going to change the content of your slide. We talked about reading order a little bit, about how how when you create things messes up your reading order. So I deliberately made some text boxes and mixed them all up. So you can see this slide. I guess you can't see this slide. It starts off, make sure readers see text boxes, allows user to reorganize, despite the fact PowerPoint organizes by order of creation, which is how screen readers will read the slide. I guess I should increase the font size on that for the next presentation. Here, we have preserves reading order, despite the fact PowerPoint organizes by creation, make sure readers see text boxes, which is how screen readers will read. It's not in the same order. All you have to do, and it doesn't show up as a problem because the program has no way of knowing what order your text should be in. So this is something you have to look for. But all you have to do is click on one of these things and say this one should be the first one, and I move it up. And so once I've got this in the order I want, I'm done with it and I move on. And I haven't figured all of this out yet, but so now I can look at my presentation and everything is green. I'm done. I'm ready to go. This demo is the one that does audio. Also, if you have lecture notes, if you type lecture notes into your presentation, it pulls those in as well. If you choose to make it a QuickTime movie and you choose to use captions, it will create a QuickTime movie with captions from your lecture notes, which is extremely cool. You can add audio to your slides. And it will allow you to record one slide at a time, but the output is one single file. So if you decide that you need to change the audio, you screwed something up, you're just re-recording one slide. Also, the HTML output from this puts a little bar at the bottom of the page, and you can listen to one slide at a time. So let's say you've put some content on a slide that's kind of difficult to understand, and the student wants to listen to that slide. Maybe they don't need to hear the whole thing. They just need to listen to 2 or 3 slides. They can replay those slides over and over again and try to get the content out of it, whereas before maybe they wouldn't get it. When you're done, you choose export. You give it a title, and then you can choose. The podcast is disabled because this is a demo version, but you can do accessible HTML, the QuickTime movie, the Microsoft Word document, and the MPEG-4 or the podcast. And yes, I know export was canceled, and I don't want to save. If you have PowerPoint open and you try to open this, it will freeze your computer. So don't do that. All right, this is a sample of the QuickTime movie that I did from this presentation. As you can see, it preserved the look of my slides. Same font and everything. The lecture thing is there because it's a demo version, and that's how he watermarks it, so you can't just use it if you want, as you want. Here's your captioning down at the bottom. It automatically breaks it into 2 lines. So if you've typed in a whole paragraph, you only get 2 lines of it at a time. And then I've recorded audio along with that.
The Lecture demonstration. This slideshow allows me to show you how Lecture helps the user create accessible PowerPoint presentations. Lecture has many advantages over its close competitor, the Illinois Accessibility
So that's probably enough to give you the idea of what that looks like. For $80, $70, $80, I think this is a pretty cool program. For those of you that aren't real thrilled about having your head show up in Integrity, this could be a really viable alternative to using the Integrity system that's on your own computer. You can do this at home. Just record whatever you want to at home using a microphone. And I wanted to show you the other pieces of this.
Untitled HTML. HTML
Stop.
title.
So this is what you get for the HTML piece. And a lot of this is configurable. So it doesn't come with the blue and the green. I did that myself just playing around. You can change the color of the bars. You can change the table of contents bar. You can change the font. You can do quite a few things there. So you see where I had that prompts for alt text and prompts for alt text 2. It shows up here,
Link. Prompt HT.
but it doesn't show up on the slide. This is fully accessible to a screen reader, and it also preserves the image. What it's doing is creating an image file, and then it's cramming all of the text into a 1 pixel by 1 pixel area that the reader pulls out, but the viewer doesn't see it, which is, again, pretty cool. And you can play
This slide uses a duplicate title. Sometimes you want duplicate
just
title
that one
in a
slide if you want
presentation
to.
when you have several slides on the same topic. You certainly don't.
The word output, again, gives you the slide as you created it, but then you can type whatever you want to. You can take your notes below the slide. Your students may go home with every day 5 different sets of printouts from their classes. If you have it this way, they can bring their computers in. A lot of them bring their computers in anyway. They can pull up the presentation. They can type the notes right there along with it. You can also use voice recognition to go in and say what you want to remember from this slide as well. Any questions about the LecShare? Okay. It's on your sheet. Also, I am going to be talking to the people at OME next week, and they're interested. So I'm really kind of hoping we can end up with a site license here. So that would be very nice. Other questions?
Why would you use QuickTime as opposed to HTML versions?
Personal preference. If you want just one single entity that can go, I don't know, I think it's a personal preference thing, really. The HTML is very portable. You can also embed the QuickTime in an HTML page, too. So, anything else? All right, I wanted to just talk about some very simple things you can do without really spending anything. Are you going to create a video for your class? Start off by scripting it. A scripted presentation, I hate scripting things. I go into a class and I talk. I have a list of things I want to talk about. I know what I'm going to do. I just talk. But you sit down to record something, or you know you're going to be recording something, it comes across much better if it's scripted. You don't say as much, or as much, or lose your place. If you do lose your place, you have something to look at. Record without an audience if possible. I've seen a number of presentations where the presenter gets very quiet for a while, and you watch them doing this. And then the next thing you know, they're talking again. Well, they've heard a question in the audience. You can't hear it on the recording. They've heard the question, they answer it, they haven't repeated it. If you do this without an audience, then you don't have those sorts of things. Now you can edit that sort of thing out, but then you have to sit there and edit it out. Why not just sit in your office with a camera and record it with a script in the first place? Then once you have the script, you can turn it into captions. Integrity can do captions. This PowerPoint thing, the LecShare can do captions. You can just post the transcript online for people to download. Are you scanning documents? Maybe you have a magazine article that you want to scan and share with your students. Run it through the optical character recognition. A scanned document that just shows up as an image is inaccessible to screen readers. It's also an image. It's a much bigger file than a text file. And so if you have a student on the other end with a slower internet connection, it's going to take them a lot more time. You used to see this a lot more on the internet than you do now. It used to be sometimes you would go look at somebody's catalog online, and instead of having small images with text, you would have actual scanned pages of their catalogs. I'm kind of showing my age, but I think a lot of you are right in there with me. Don't do that. Convert it to text so that it's usable. In some cases, you may want to go in and add some tags to your PDF to make it more structured and more usable. Also, are you using images, graphs, and charts? Then put in alt text, whether it's word processing, a web page, a PDF, PowerPoint, etc. And just really briefly, all you have to do is select your image. You right-click, Format Picture, click on this Web tab, and it brings up a box. Oops. And then you have alt text. It's pretty darn simple. And again, if you're using the LecShare, it's going to pull this alt text out and it'll be there. All right. But you can't plan for all of it, right? You can't have a course that's going to be accessible to everybody with any kind of disability using any kind of technology. There are too many variables for that. What you can do is include a statement on your syllabus that encourages students with disabilities to disclose. We have such a statement on the DSS website under For Faculty. So if you don't have something on your syllabus now, I encourage you to go look at that. I believe in the course packet, if you're teaching DCE courses, they're going to be putting that in the course packet as well, so that will be there. Exercise your flexibility and creativity, as you see this young woman doing. We get an awful lot of great ideas from people who maybe don't know what available options are. They're making do with what they've got, and they may come up with brilliant ideas. I mean, who knew we would be using Tegrity to film a sign language interpreter? It's a different use for the same system, and we can do even better than that, I'm sure. Offer alternative assignments if absolutely necessary. If you are using chat as part of your course, and let's say you're using audio chat and you have a student who's deaf, but if you change to a text-based chat, you have another student with a mobility impairment, and you can't win here, you can create an alternate assignment. Maybe you move the chat sessions to the message board, or maybe you simply create another assignment that that student can do that would teach the same sort of skill, but gets around the problems with the technology. And then rely on the expertise of others. We live in a culture now where you can't know everything. You can't know everything about your computer, even about your field. Knowing what listservs to go to and what blogs to go to and who to call for help, that's what the key is. And then in closing, accessible design benefits everyone. Students with disabilities, students with undocumented disabilities, learning styles, ESL, people using older technology, people using new technology that's smaller and portable. It also benefits our instructors because you have well-organized, clean, and flexible courses, content that can be repurposed. You have improved student participation and feedback, which hopefully turns into lower dropout rates, which increase retention of students. You get more favorable student evaluations. K-State Online would not be used as much as it is now if it weren't for our students demanding its use. They have a real impact on what we do and how we do it. So, if we do this, everybody wins. Questions? Yes?
Could you talk about possible policies on this campus regarding accessibility?
Okay. Question is about policies. We do have a web accessible, or web design, that's not really a policy, it's sort of a memo that came out in 2001. It's based on state policy that says all of our web pages need to be accessible. if there are web pages that students, administration web pages, department web pages. There's not really any support for that. We don't have people who go around to different departments and make their web pages for them. And so that hasn't really happened. That's why if you use the validator, go back to your office, download Mozilla, or you don't even need to do that. You can go to these validators with the URLs I've given you, and validate your department's web page, see how it does. Chances are good it's not going to do so hot. We are also working on a policy to make our courses accessible. And again, I'm here to help people figure out how to do that, how to help individual students, but also how to create a course from the beginning that's accessible. And hopefully you'll be hearing more about that soon. That has yet to go to the deans or faculty senate or anything, so there's not really a lot I can tell you about that right now. Other questions?
Yeah, Stacy, we, on our course information packets that you mentioned, we do most of those in Word, some Word Perfect, but we convert those to PDF. Are there reasons we should consider going ahead and doing the HTML instead? Or
HTML would be more broadly accessible.
Okay. Is it, one of the reasons we like PDF is because it can't be touched, it can't be changed. Is there a way of saving it as HTML that cannot be changed? Because for one reason, we don't want, instructors might want to change some things, and that's fine, but we can't let instructors change some of our specific policies, like read
Right.
or something. So.
Go ahead.
There's a software available, contribute, where a user can do only the designated portions of a web page, change those. Is created with a template through Dreamweaver, where the person controlling that has locked down, created the template and locked down the areas they don't want touched. So then you give a user access through a simple software contribute, and they're just changing the parts they're allowed to change. So it's possible, yes.
Okay. Relating to her question, how difficult is it to tag it? Tag the documents so that they're readable in PDFs? Because I see PDFs improperly tagged and the reader's jumping all over the place. Is that hard to do to take care of this problem here?
As I understand it, if you create it in Word with styles and then save it as a PDF, that will transfer. Ben's more of a PDF expert than I am as far as actually tagging in the PDF.
Or it's better in some ways to start with a HTML document that's tagged and create that into a PDF. That'll also carry over. But both ways, as long as the tags are in place, the newer forms of Acrobat carry across.
Yeah.
And so then
Like
it's
six and up, is that?
5's where you started running into the problems. You actually had to check a box to even turn it on in 5. And 4 really didn't even have a lot of features.
And Adobe does have a built-in reader. So if someone's using JAWS and JAWS doesn't like the Adobe plugin, they can use the built-in Adobe reader. It's not fabulous, but it does read it.
It needs the tags.
Pardon?
It needs the tags.
It needs it needs the structure. Sure. It's much the same as your browser window needs structure in an HTML document in order to interpret it. The reader needs that structure in the document it's reading in order to interpret it. I think a lot of people are worried about their content being changed, and I think in some cases that's an honest worry. But if someone's determined enough to really mess around with the system, they're going to find a way to mess with things. Having the version on your server that's the official version may be the best way to keep students, for example. Student could download a syllabus and change it any way they want to and claim this was a syllabus that they had, and therefore the teacher ought to be, giving them an A because it says everybody who enrolls in this class will get an A. But if you had that official version on your server that you can compare this to, then when there are problems, you can say, no, this isn't the official thing. I think there probably are some other security measures, but that's a programming question. Anybody else? Yes.
One of my classes, the library has put up scanned versions of journal articles for my students to access. that the readers can't read them, can
If they are images,
they? They're just images.
then no, the readers can't read them, they're inaccessible.
Well, how can they be made accessible?
Is it interlibrary loan that's doing this?
No.
Or
Yes.
Is it?
is it?
That interlibrary loan, that's all you can get,
Right.
for the most part.
There
you get-
is,
You get PDFs that were made from the files from the original journals off their website, but if you don't have a license to pull that off, a lot of times it's scanned in, maybe from Nebraska, Missouri, wherever, and
you can take that PDF and still run it through the OCR software.
yeah, it'd be
Yeah,
a
I
lot
mean,
of work,
the
because it doesn't
quality
read it
is
very
not
well.
great.
They're not very clear.
Yeah, the quality is going to depend a lot on the quality of the scan. If the software can't figure out what the text is, just like when you're reading a document that's been copied and the toner cartridge was running low, you may have trouble with it. The scanner will have the same problem. It's a great convenience on one hand, but on the other hand, if you are translating it with OCR, you do have to go in and run a spell checker. You know, we just are not to the point yet where the technology can take the place of human eyes. Same thing with the voice recognition software. It's getting there, but you can't yet just talk and have it get everything that you say perfectly. It might be a good thing to start talking to the library and saying, look, we'd really like to have OCR software. We'd really like to have this stuff translated before it goes up or offer students an option. You know, if you all talk to the library, it's going to get a lot further than if it's just me talking to the library.
I'm not sure it would work for these kinds of articles. I mean, they pull a lot of tables and numbers and statistics.
In that case, it's good to go into the tables. If you translate it, it maintains the images, and you can go in and put in a long description for that image. So it does require a little more effort on the time of the part of the instructor. The good news is, if you're using those articles over and over again, you only have to do that once. So, so maybe ask for a graduate student, student workers, I don't know. It's the
Publisher be able to provide you with?
I don't know, it seems like some newer publications I've looked for on the internet, they will have sometimes an HTML version and
Or
a text
text,
version,
right,
or,
it's typical.
but probably only the more recent journals, not the older ones.
At this point, we are still at the place where we are having to interpret these files for our students. We're having to do something for our students. It's sort of like the political system. If you complain enough, eventually things change. So if you start telling the publishers, we need X, then eventually that will change. But it takes people making phone calls or sending emails and saying, I can't use your content because it needs to be this. I need it in text version or whatever. And you know they have it in a text version somewhere. It shouldn't be that hard. They had to have it in text version to create the journal in the first place. Mm-hmm.
And I've had students with some mobility issues who complain, and I keep saying, well, you need to get a voice recognition program, but they don't always do it. Whose responsibility is it? I mean, can I expect the student with the problem of typing to buy their own voice recognition program?
Expecting them to purchase it to make their life easier, no. You can certainly recommend it, but it can't be a course requirement unless you're requiring everybody.
If I was teaching a statistics course and everyone had to have a particular piece of software,
Then that's a requirement for the course. Right.
We will listen
The
to
Landon
geologists
Lecture
next.
Chemicals are developed.
I would like to take a moment to congratulate
Issue
all of you
of,
who are graduating today with virtual commencement.
Kansas State University's Office of Mediated Education.